Hey guys, tonight we drift into Naples, a city where the stones are worn thin by centuries of footsteps, and the air is thick with the hum of scooters darting between laundry-strewn balconies. The alleys echo with the chatter of vendors, the faint sting of diesel fumes, and the quick laughter of kids playing football in the tightest of courtyards. Somewhere in this tangle of shadow and sound, an empire begins to take form, and you probably won't survive 5 minutes here, not with the way eyes size you up at every corner, calculating whether you belong or whether you're prey. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from, so drop your location and your local time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The alleys of Naples in the late 20th century carry a weight that feels older than time. Vendors call out in voices cracked by long days, selling tomatoes still warm from the sun. Fishermen drag in crates that smell of salt and iron. Church bells strike the hour, but nobody listens. They measure time by money, by favors, by the shifting balance of fear and respect. These are streets where history never really leaves. It just changes outfits. The Romans left their aqueducts, the Spanish their courtyards, and now the Camorra shapes the rhythm of life with invisible hands. Every wall seems to whisper of survival. Pockmarks from bullets are patched over with fresh plaster, though everyone remembers who fell there. Graffiti spreads like ivy, not just slogans but warnings, signatures of loyalty and threat. The narrow lanes, some so tight 2 people can barely pass, are stages for quick deals and quicker betrayals. In the golden light of late afternoon, when the city seems softened, you might almost believe it is simply another Mediterranean town of laughter and family. But look closer. The shopkeeper's smile tightens when unfamiliar faces approach. The boy bouncing a ball against the wall glances twice at the stranger lingering too long. The shadow behind the shutter is not just an old man resting. It is someone watching, reporting, cataloging. For Vincenzo Licciardi, these alleys are both cradle and classroom. Born into Secondigliano, a district that smells of fresh bread and iron gates, he absorbs the codes long before he understands them. Respect, silence, survival. The streets teach faster than any school, and the lessons are written in scars. Children grow into lookouts. Mothers learn to cook meals that stretch beyond reason. Fathers gamble on both lottery tickets and dangerous favors. It is no wonder that crime feels less like rebellion here and more like infrastructure. Naples itself is a paradox. On one hand, it is the city of Caravaggio canvases, of operatic areas echoing out of cracked windows, of volcanic soil that makes tomatoes taste like fire and sugar. On the other, it is a city of unemployment rates that crush dreams, of sprawling housing projects where elevators stop working within weeks of being installed, of a bureaucracy so tangled it feels deliberate. Many people still think that the Camorra grew only out of greed. But what do you think? Was it not also a response to the vacuum left by a state too distant, too indifferent? When trash piles up for weeks and rats grow bold enough to strut across piazzas, somebody will always step forward with trucks, men, and solutions. The question is only what price the people will pay. Through the 1970s and into the 1980s, Naples is alive with contradictions. Tourists admire frescoes while dealers exchange packages on the same street. Priests bless festivals even as parishioners whisper about who was shot 2 nights before. And amid all this, the Camorra evolves, no longer just scattered gangs extorting bakers and tailors. It becomes a network of businessmen in leather jackets, blending backroom meetings with boardroom strategies. Vincenzo watches this evolution with a quiet fascination. He isn't the loudest in the room, nor the flashiest. He prefers to measure, to calculate, to think of systems. This is why the city calls him the engineer. Not because he designs bridges or buildings, but because he designs power. Like an engineer studying the flow of water, he studies the flow of money and loyalty. He knows where pressure builds, where leaks form, and how to reroute everything so the machine never stops. And though the city is chaotic, unpredictable, almost comically loud at times, he sees patterns. Small gears turning larger ones. Walking the Naples alleys in those years, you would feel two currents under your feet. One is the centuries-old hum of life, of songs, of families shouting across balconies. The other is the pulse of an underground order, unseen but deeply felt, like the vibration of trains running below the pavement. It is into this current that young Vincenzo steps, not rushing, not flaunting, but already sketching the designs of something that would change Naples forever. Boyhood in Secondigliano is a blend of sunlit courtyards and cracked stairwells, of mothers yelling children's names across balconies, and of fathers who vanish for hours, chasing the kind of work that barely pays for bread. For Vincenzo Licciardi, childhood never feels soft. It is gritty, restless, and forever watched. Secondigliano, a northern district of Naples, becomes his first universe. Tower blocks rise like stern guardians, concrete giants with peeling paint, balconies sagging under laundry lines, and courtyards where dust swirls in summer heat. The streets smell of fried anchovies, damp stone, and the faint sweetness of stolen gasoline being siphoned into plastic bottles. Vincenzo's earliest memories are not of toys, but of transactions. A neighbor pressing a folded bill into another's palm in exchange for a whispered promise. A cousin slipping into a side alley with a carton of cigarettes that everyone knows did not come from the store. These acts are normal to him, as ordinary as schoolbooks and chalk dust. Even at 6 or 7, he understands that the adults measure trust by silence more than by words. To speak too much is to lose what little you have. To keep quiet is to hold power. His family is no different. The Licciardis, already tied to local networks, live with the knowledge that every neighbor knows who they are. Vincenzo watches his uncles arrive at odd hours, stepping from dented Fiats, their suits wrinkled, yet carrying an air of purpose. They bring news, laughter, and the occasional small gift, money slipped into his mother's apron, enough to keep the family from slipping beneath the surface. To a boy's eyes, it feels like magic. Men who seem powerful without working in any office. Men who can turn fear into income. Yet, beneath the allure lies hardship. School is a daily trek past shuttered shops and corners where older boys lurk with eyes sharper than teachers. Teachers preach discipline and arithmetic, but Vincenzo knows the true lessons are outside, where one wrong look can earn a slap, and one misplaced word can echo across alleys. Still, he sits in classrooms, pencil poised, pretending to care about maps of Italy, while secretly sketching tiny diagrams, streets, corners, routes, maps of his own world. He doesn't know it yet, but these are the first drafts of the systems he will later master. Naples in the 1960s and 1970s is not forgiving to boys like him. Official unemployment hovers around numbers so high they feel meaningless. Half the men in his neighborhood stand idle during the day. Many people still think that these neighborhoods produced criminals by choice alone. But what do you think? How much choice exists when your father earns less in a week than your neighbor earns in a single night moving packages from a dockside truck? To Vincenzo, the balance is obvious. School teaches patience, but the streets reward initiative. Evenings in his childhood are filled with the echoes of church bells, the clatter of plates, and his mother's stern instructions. Don't linger, don't stare, don't ask. Yet curiosity is stitched into him. He lingers anyway, watching groups of older boys shuffle cards, exchange coins, and talk in coded fragments. He notices who laughs loudest, who stays silent, and who always seems to end with more than he started. These observations etch themselves into his young mind. He may not yet be a participant, but he is already a student. There is warmth, too. Neapolitan families cling tightly to one another, weaving joy into small rituals. Sundays mean long tables with pasta, wine, and endless argument. Neighbors share coffee like it is a sacred ceremony, bitter and black, brewed strong enough to wake the dead. Vincenzo grows up hearing opera arias blasting from radios, mixed with the sharp whistles of market sellers. Life is raw, unpolished, and deeply alive. For every bruise the streets deliver, there is laughter echoing through stairwells at night. One memory follows him, a game of football in a dusty courtyard. The ball is old, patched with tape, but the energy is fierce. Boys shout names of famous players, imagining themselves as heroes. Vincenzo plays quietly, calculating angles, passing instead of showing off. He is not the boy who kicks hardest. He is the one who sees where the ball will go 2 moves ahead. Friends tease him for being serious, for rarely smiling, but they also start to notice. His teams often win, not by luck, but by his invisible orchestration. The nickname, the Engineer, is still far away, yet its seed is already planted. At night, he lies awake listening to scooters buzz by, to arguments carried out in low voices, to the occasional crack that may be a firework, or may not. He thinks about the lines on his childish maps, how each path leads somewhere different, how each person seems connected by unseen strings. While other boys dream of football glory, Vincenzo dreams of systems. He doesn't yet know the price such dreams will demand. The Licciardi clan does not rise from nowhere. Its foundation is built on layers of kinship, loyalty, and a neighborhood that understands exactly where power comes from. In Secondigliano, family is never just blood. It is a web that stretches across stairwells, marriages, and friendships sealed with favors. For young Vincenzo, the word clan is not something from television or legend. It is Sunday dinners crowded with cousins, uncles who speak in half-finished sentences, and women who roll pasta while listening for the sound of a knock that might bring either good news or sudden dread. The roots of the clan stretch back decades, to a time when Naples was fractured into small gangs, each controlling little more than a few streets. The Licciardis, though not the largest or most violent, prove themselves with consistency. They collect debts without hesitation. They maintain silence even under pressure. And they know how to distribute small benefits to the neighborhood: bread, cigarettes, an occasional loan that carries both relief and a reminder of who really governs here. Vincenzo absorbs this structure like a language. By the time he is old enough to run errands, he already knows who in the building can be trusted, who cannot, and who might shift allegiances if the wind changes. The clan's foundation rests on 3 pillars: extortion, smuggling, and reputation. Extortion is almost ritualistic. Shopkeepers expect the knock on the door. Money changes hands, but so does reassurance. No rival will touch you if you are under the Licciardi umbrella. Smuggling thrives through the port of Naples, a place where containers pass with such frequency that a clever crew can move almost anything unnoticed. Reputation, however, is the invisible cement. To be known as reliable, discreet, and efficient means more than any gun in a waistband. It means survival without constant bloodshed. Vincenzo's relatives teach him these principles not with lectures, but with stories. He hears about an uncle who collected payment without raising his voice, who kept his hands clean yet made men tremble. He hears about another who once took a beating rather than betray a secret. The boy listens carefully, never interrupting, storing each story as if it were a page in a manual. Others may laugh, may boast, may exaggerate, but Vincenzo listens for the patterns. What works, what fails, what makes power last beyond a single act of violence. The Licciardi clan also benefits from Naples' unique geography. Secondigliano, Scampia, and the surrounding districts are tightly wound, with endless staircases, blind corners, and passages known only to locals. Outsiders get lost in minutes. Insiders move like water. It is here that the family carves out influence, using the maze itself as protection. Police may raid, but neighbors warn one another, shutters slam shut, and by the time uniforms arrive, the courtyards are silent. Many people still think that law enforcement's failures were due to corruption alone. But what do you think? Was it not also the city's very design? The way its narrow arteries sheltered those who belonged. As the clan's presence solidifies, Vincenzo witnesses the blending of crime and community. Weddings become unofficial summits, baptisms a chance to reaffirm ties. A family tragedy is not just mourned, but used as a test of loyalty. Who shows up, who pays respects, who offers money for funeral costs. Every social ritual doubles as political theater. To a child, it seems natural. To Vincenzo, it is education. He notices how uncles stand in certain positions, how cousins carry envelopes, how the laughter masks transactions. The family's reach begins to grow in the late 1970s, when smuggling opportunities expand. Cigarettes, long the staple, are joined by other goods slipping through the port. The profits begin to change the texture of life. Better suits appear at gatherings. Cars gleam newer. Children receive gifts that no ordinary worker could afford. Vincenzo sees the difference between those within the clan's embrace and those outside it. A friend from school wears shoes with holes. Vincenzo's cousins wear imported sneakers. The message is clear. Loyalty yields comfort. Still, the clan knows limits. They avoid excessive show, the kind that invites envy or headlines. Violence, when it happens, is quick, decisive, and rarely discussed afterward. The young boy notes this restraint. He learns that power is not the loudest shout in the piazza, but the quietest nod in the corner. His uncles call it prudenza, prudence, a word that lodges deep in his mind. On summer nights, when the family gathers on balconies with wine and laughter, Vincenzo sits slightly apart, watching how elders guide conversations. He notices when a joke is used to soften tension, when a toast doubles as a command. He senses the rhythm of hierarchy. Even as a child, he sees the clan less as individuals and more as a machine, a system with gears, each role essential, each part replaceable. He begins to imagine how the system could be tuned, how inefficiencies could be smoothed. He is not yet in charge, not even close, but his mind is already engineering. Teenage years arrive with the weight of expectation, and for Vincenzo Licciardi, adolescence is not about rebellion against the family code, but about slipping more deeply into it. In Secondigliano, a teenager is not a child, but an apprentice. Boys his age are already running errands, watching corners, and carrying messages. By the time Vincenzo is 15, he knows that his silence and his observation earn more respect than the bravado of others. He is never the loudest voice in the alley, never the one to start a fight at school. Instead, he cultivates a calm detachment. Teachers describe him as bright but uninterested, a boy who completes his assignments without enthusiasm, whose gaze often drifts toward the window as though calculating something outside. In truth, he is watching the world move. He notices which fathers come home with tired shoulders and which come home with pockets full of lira. He notes how often the police car patrols the street, how neighbors behave differently when uniforms appear. While other boys chase distractions, Vincenzo gathers data. At home, his role begins to shift. No longer just a child to be shielded, he is now a listener included in whispers. His uncles talk business at the dinner table, and though he is not yet part of their operations, he sits quietly, absorbing every word. He hears about debts collected, about shipments delayed, about alliances that need smoothing. His mother scolds them sometimes for speaking in front of him, but they wave her concerns away. They see the boy's sharpness, his ability to keep secrets, and they trust that one day it will serve the family. The streets test him as well. On his way home from school, a group of older boys once tries to corner him, demanding he hand over coins. Instead of panicking, he calculates escape routes. How many steps to the next alley? Which balconies are open where neighbors might shout? How quickly he can run. He doesn't fight, but he doesn't surrender either. With a single glance over his shoulder, he signals to a cousin standing nearby. Within minutes, the confrontation dissolves, the older boys dispersing. The message spreads. Vincenzo is not easy prey. By 16, he starts to take part in small errands. A package delivered, a message passed along, a watchful eye kept on an unfamiliar car parked too long at the end of the street. None of it glamorous, all of it essential. He is precise, punctual, reliable, qualities that do not bring immediate riches but do build trust. It is here that he earns a quiet respect. Others his age brag about adventures. Vincenzo simply nods, keeps his mouth shut, and waits. Naples in the late 1970s is a city of contradictions. Young people are lured by disco lights and imported fashion, yet unemployment claws at them. Many people still think that the Camorra recruited only from desperation. But what do you think? Was it not also the thrill of belonging? The sense that one's life could matter beyond factory shifts or empty classrooms? Vincenzo, though reserved, feels that pull. He does not crave noise or violence, but he craves order, the kind of order that his family seems to provide where the state fails. His demeanor earns him a reputation among relatives as il ragazzo serio, the serious boy. He avoids flashy clothes, preferring muted jackets and plain shoes. He speaks sparingly, and when he does, it is often to ask a question that makes elders pause. Once, during a family discussion about dividing money from an extortion scheme, he asks why one shopkeeper pays more than another when their businesses are similar. The question lingers, and an uncle admits they had not thought to standardize payments. Vincenzo sees inefficiency where others see routine. It is the first hint of the mind that will later systematize the alliance. Even friendships are chosen carefully. While other boys his age drift between groups, Vincenzo stays close to a small circle of cousins and neighbors who share his temperament. Together, they play cards in the evenings, their laughter subdued, their eyes always flicking toward the street for movement. These are bonds forged not only by amusement, but by an understanding that tomorrow they may be called upon to prove their loyalty. His teenage years are also marked by the growing presence of Scampia's towers, massive concrete blocks that begin to house thousands. He watches as these towers fill with families, many struggling, many already tied to small-time dealing. The architecture itself feels like a fortress, one that the clans will later exploit. For now, Vincenzo studies it with fascination. Where others see only housing projects, he sees potential networks, a grid where goods and money can circulate unseen. In quiet moments, he still sketches in notebooks. Not football plays anymore, but crude diagrams of streets, blocks, and flows of people. To him, the city is a circuit board, each alley a wire, each shop a switch. He does not yet know he is designing his future, but he feels instinctively that structure and pattern are his tools. While other boys dream of leaving Naples, Vincenzo dreams of mastering it. The first brush with crime always feels smaller than it is. For Vincenzo, it begins not with guns or grand schemes, but with errands that carry more weight than they appear. He is still a teenager, moving through the alleys with that mix of invisibility and vigilance that only locals possess. His uncles and cousins, recognizing his reliability, begin to trust him with tasks that blur the line between family chore and criminal apprenticeship. One evening, he is handed a small envelope, just paper, sealed, with no explanation. He is told to walk 3 blocks, knock on a door, and hand it over without a word. The walk takes only minutes, but the pulse in his ears makes it feel longer. He knocks, the door opens, a hand takes the envelope, and the door closes again. No thanks, no questions. It is over in seconds. Yet that moment stays with him. He realizes power can move invisibly, quietly, with nothing more than trust and silence. Soon, errands multiply. Sometimes it is money, sometimes a message. Once, it is a small bag that smells faintly of tobacco, though he suspects it is more than that. He learns not to ask. Each task is a test of composure. If he looks nervous, if he lingers, if he draws attention, he fails. But Vincenzo never fails. His calm, measured steps become his signature. Neighbors glance at him and see only a serious young man on family business. They do not see the gears turning in his mind, the way he calculates every corner, every shadow. The first real thrill comes when he is asked to accompany older cousins on a collection. A shopkeeper, behind on payments, needs reminding. Vincenzo does not speak. He simply stands by the door while his cousins talk. He watches the shopkeeper's hands tremble as coins and bills are placed on the counter. He notices how one cousin smiles warmly, while another glares. Good cop, bad cop, performed not for law, but for order. When they leave, Vincenzo feels a strange mix of guilt and excitement. He has not lifted a finger, yet he has been part of something larger. In Secondigliano, this is how boys become men. Not with birthdays or diplomas, but with moments where silence and presence matter more than words. Vincenzo grows into this role seamlessly. He never boasts about it. He barely even discusses it with his closest friends. Instead, he stores each experience like data. He notes how much money changes hands, how long conversations take, which threats work best. Where others see drama, he sees process. Naples in these years is alive with opportunity for those willing to step outside legality. Smuggling cigarettes through the port is so common that it almost feels legitimate. Trucks move at night, docks bustle with activity, and men with clipboards look the other way for the right price. Vincenzo sometimes assists in unloading crates, his hands blackened with soot and salt. He feels the scale of it, the way a single shipment can feed dozens of families, the way profits ripple outward into bars, cafes, and even churches. Many people still think that smuggling was just about greed. But what do you think? Was it not also a parallel economy? A shadow industry that kept neighborhoods alive when official channels failed them? The first time he holds a gun, it is not in violence but in ritual. An uncle shows him how to check if it is loaded, how to keep the barrel pointed down, how to treat it with respect. Vincenzo's hands do not shake. He listens, nods, places the weapon back without flourish. For him, the gun is not a toy, not even a symbol. It is just another tool in a system that demands order. He understands already. Fear does not come from the gun itself, but from the network that stands behind it. There are moments of levity, too. Once, during a late-night errand, a stray dog follows him for several blocks, its tail wagging. Vincenzo, normally composed, cannot help but chuckle at the absurdity of trying to look serious with a mutt trotting beside him. His cousin later teases him, calling him Il Boss del Cane, the dog's boss. The nickname fades, but the memory lingers as one of the rare times he laughs freely. By the time he reaches his late teens, Vincenzo has stepped firmly onto the path. He is not yet leading, but he is indispensable. Trusted for his silence, respected for his precision, he moves through the streets with a confidence beyond his years. He knows that these first brushes with crime are not isolated events. They are the foundation of something far larger. And in his mind, plans are already forming. Blueprints of power that will one day shape the entire city. The 1970s in Naples are restless, raw, and perpetually on the brink of eruption. For a teenager like Vincenzo, the city feels like a classroom where chaos itself is the teacher. Graffiti spreads across walls like urgent messages. Protests flicker through university corridors. And the economic crisis weighs heavily on every household. Factories close, jobs vanish, and a generation of young men stand idle on corners with little more than time and frustration. Naples, always noisy, now hums with something sharper. Discontent. The Camorra thrives in this atmosphere. What began as small neighborhood gangs is evolving into something closer to organized corporations of crime. Families with long histories of smuggling and extortion begin to weave themselves into broader networks. Vincenzo, now old enough to understand the scale, observes carefully. He sees that the city's turmoil is not a barrier. It is an opportunity. Where officials fail, clans step in. They handle disputes, offer loans, and provide the kind of structure that institutions neglect. Many people still think that the Camorra simply corrupted Naples. But what do you think? Was it not also that Naples left a vacuum, and the Camorra merely filled it with ruthless efficiency? Street life reflects this transition. The alleys of Secondigliano are no longer just local playgrounds. They are corridors for trade, carrying contraband cigarettes, stolen radios, and whispers of new products arriving through the port. Vincenzo watches as boys his age vanish into vans at night, returning at dawn with money stuffed into pockets. He sees men in leather jackets, not yet the suited businessmen they will later become, holding court in bars thick with smoke. Deals are struck over espresso, Entire operations mapped on napkins. The police presence grows heavier, yet often feels toothless. Patrol cars make their rounds. Sirens echo at odd hours, but arrests rarely dismantle the machinery. Corruption plays a part, of course, but so does the sheer complexity of the networks. Even if one man is caught, 10 others fill the gap. For Vincenzo, this realization is a revelation. Systems survive individuals. To him, it is proof that building structures, not just wielding violence, is the true key to enduring power. The social fabric of Naples phrase. Garbage piles up in piazzas, electricity cuts out at inconvenient times, and bureaucratic offices move slower than molasses. Families despair, yet life continues. Children run through courtyards, women hang laundry, men argue about football. Humor becomes survival, sarcasm the city's second language. Even Vincenzo, usually serious, picks up the rhythm of Neapolitan irony. Once, while waiting on a corner during a long-delayed meeting, he jokes to a cousin that the only thing Naples delivers on time is hunger. The cousin laughs, the tension eases, and Vincenzo tucks the moment away. Humor, used sparingly, can be as useful as intimidation. International events also seep into the streets. News of political assassinations, student riots, and global oil crises reach even the tightest courtyards. Television brings images of far-off chaos into Neapolitan homes. But for families like the Licciardis, the local struggle feels more pressing. The Secondigliano towers begin to fill with migrants from rural areas, swelling the population, creating fertile ground for both community and conflict. To Vincenzo, the demographic shift looks less like chance and more like a future infrastructure for commerce, human, illegal, or both. One incident stays with him. A massive demonstration near Piazza Garibaldi. Workers march with banners, voices echoing against centuries-old buildings. Vincenzo stands at the edge, not participating, just watching. He notices how leaders with megaphones guide the crowd, how chants rise and fall like tides, how one small group can influence thousands. To others, it is a protest. To Vincenzo, it is a blueprint. Influence, when organized, can move mountains or cities. At home, the Licciardi clan adjusts to these shifting conditions. They tighten alliances, refine operations, and quietly expand their reach. Vincenzo continues his role as observer, errand boy, and apprentice. But his thoughts grow larger. He begins to imagine how scattered pieces could be connected, how fragmented gangs could be streamlined. His notebooks now contain sketches not just of alleys, but of entire districts, arrows marking flows of goods and money. He dreams of systems resilient enough to survive raids, betrayals, and the chaos that defines Naples itself. The city is volatile, but Vincenzo feels calm in its storm. While others see unpredictability, he sees patterns waiting to be organized. And in that restless decade, the boy from Secondigliano begins to glimpse the man he will become, the engineer not of bridges, but of power. In every great story of power, there is a moment when a small circle of friends becomes something more. For Vincenzo Licciardi, this begins quietly, almost invisibly, in the courtyards and back rooms of Secondigliano. He is no longer a boy running errands. He is a young man shaping bonds that will one day form the skeleton of an empire. The friendships of his youth are not accidental. He gravitates toward those who share his temperament. Serious boys, loyal cousins, neighbors with sharp eyes and quiet mouths. They sit together on steps, smoke cigarettes stolen from uncles, and play endless games of cards. Yet beneath the small talk, they are practicing something greater: trust, silence, patience. A joke is shared, a secret kept, and slowly a bond hardens. In a world where betrayal can kill, friendship is currency. One friend, Carmine, is quick with numbers. He calculates winnings faster than anyone at the card table. Another, Salvatore, is physically imposing, the kind of boy who could win a fight with a stare alone. Vincenzo positions himself between them, not as leader yet, but as quiet anchor. He listens more than he speaks, offering the occasional observation that reveals he is seeing more than they realized. They begin to turn to him, not because he demands it, but because his steadiness makes them trust him. These early bonds soon carry weight. The older men of the Licciardi clan notice that when Vincenzo is tasked with an errand, he brings his friends along, and the jobs get done smoothly. A collection completed without argument, a package delivered on time, a watch kept all night without distraction. Efficiency impresses. The uncles and cousins whisper approval, and suddenly the young men find themselves entrusted with more responsibility. Naples itself offers endless opportunities for boys bold enough to reach for them. The port bustles, trucks rumble through narrow streets, and the demand for contraband grows daily. Cigarettes, radios, fabrics, anything that slips past customs can be sold for profit. Vincenzo's crew becomes useful in this world. They carry loads, keep eyes on routes, and ensure that shipments move without interference. For Vincenzo, each job is less about money and more about testing the system. He times how long deliveries take, notes which streets are safer, and calculates how many men are truly needed. Many people still think that gangs like his formed chaotically, driven by bravado and chance. But what do you think? Doesn't it seem more like Vincenzo was already sketching the outlines of structure? His friends may not have realized it, but they were pieces on a board he was learning to arrange. There are lighter moments too. Once, during a night spent guarding a shipment, the group sits in a damp warehouse, shivering in the draft. To pass the time, Salvatore begins imitating one of their uncles, exaggerating his gruff voice and dramatic hand gestures. The warehouse fills with laughter, even Vincenzo cracking a rare smile. But then, with a glance at the clock, he reminds them to focus, and the laughter fades back into watchfulness. The balance is clear. Camaraderie is allowed, but order always returns. The city around them feeds their ambition. In the new high-rise projects of Scampia, entire floors are buzzing with illegal trade. Vincenzo visits cousins there and is struck by the sheer density, the way goods can move from one apartment to another without ever touching the street. To him, it looks like a hive, a living network. He begins to imagine how such networks could be scaled, coordinated, and controlled. His friends, meanwhile, only see quick profits, but they follow his lead because his ideas always seem to work. By his early 20s, Vincenzo has a reputation among peers: reliable, thoughtful, never reckless. Older bosses begin to nod at him in meetings, including him in discussions where once he would have been ignored. His friends notice this shift, and though none declare him their leader, the unspoken truth emerges. When Vincenzo speaks, they listen. This small circle, bonded in youth, becomes the embryo of something far larger. The trust they build in dusty courtyards and smoky back rooms will later underpin entire districts, entire empires. For now, it is just friendship, loyalty shared over cheap wine and endless cigarettes. But in the quiet calculations of Vincenzo's mind, it is already much more. The first taste of money is always intoxicating, even when it comes in small, crumpled bills. For Vincenzo Licciardi, that moment arrives in his early 20s, when errands and watchful nights begin to yield more than mere respect. A folded envelope pressed into his hand after a job, a quiet nod from an uncle, and suddenly he feels the weight of currency that he did not beg for, did not labor for in the way factory workers do. It is money earned through silence, precision, and trust, and it carries a power beyond its modest sum. He spends little. While some of his friends rush to buy flashy jackets, gold chains, or nights of drinking, Vincenzo tucks most of it away. He buys his mother small gifts, a new coffee pot, fresh linens, once even a pair of sturdy shoes for his father. These gestures seem simple, but they are symbolic. He is showing his family that he can provide, that his path, however shadowed, brings tangible comfort. His parents never speak openly of pride, but his mother's softened sigh when she opens the box of shoes says enough. The streets notice too. Money changes how people look at you. Shopkeepers greet him with a different tone, half cautious, half respectful. Neighbors who once brushed past now linger in doorways, curious about the quiet young man who seems to walk taller. His friends, already loyal, begin to trust his judgment even more. If Vincenzo suggests reinvesting their small earnings rather than wasting them, they listen. Soon, the group is pooling funds, small investments in larger operations. The scale of opportunity in Naples at this time is enormous. Smuggling networks expand and contraband cigarettes flood the city. Vincenzo joins his cousins on nights when trucks unload crates in hidden courtyards, the air thick with smoke and anticipation. His share grows, not vast, but steady. He begins to understand the rhythm of profit, goods in, money out, middlemen satisfied. To others, it is simple hustle. To him, it is proof of a formula, one that can be replicated, refined, scaled. One evening, after a successful run, his crew gathers in a small bar. Carmine, ever the joker, slaps down a handful of notes and declares the next round on him. Laughter fills the room, the kind of laughter that momentarily dissolves the weight of the world. Vincenzo smiles, but keeps his eyes on the bigger picture. He wonders how many such bars across Naples host similar scenes, and how many of those men will squander their gains by morning. He is determined to be different. The allure of easy cash does tempt him at times. He considers buying a motorbike, sleek and loud, the kind that would turn heads. But restraint wins. He tells himself that real power is not in spending, but in control. A motorbike may earn envy today, but savings can fund empires tomorrow. It is a philosophy that will later separate him from the flamboyant bosses whose greed exposes them. Many people still think that early criminal earnings are about indulgence. But what do you think? Wasn't it also about proving self-worth in a society that denied opportunity? Vincenzo feels that in every note he holds. While classmates from school search in vain for stable work, he builds his own income stream, answerable to no employer, no bureaucracy. For him, the first taste of money is also the first taste of freedom. One story from these years becomes part of family lore. After a shipment brings in more than expected, Vincenzo insists on setting aside a portion for the widow of a man who once helped their clan. His friends grumble. They want their full shares. But Vincenzo is adamant. Loyalty must be repaid, debts honored, even across death. Reluctantly, the group agrees, and the widow receives an envelope she never expected. To her, it is salvation. To Vincenzo, it is investment, not in money, but in reputation. As coins and bills accumulate, so does his confidence. He moves through Secondigliano not as a boy lingering at corners, but as a man recognized in whispers. His first taste of money does not intoxicate him into recklessness. Instead, it sharpens his appetite for structure, for permanence. If a few errands can buy shoes and coffee pots, what could an entire system buy? The question hums in his mind, and he begins to imagine the answer. Mentors arrive in many forms, and for Vincenzo Licciardi, they are mostly relatives whose names carry quiet authority in Secondigliano. His uncles, cousins, and older associates provide the education that no schoolbook could ever give. Around the dinner table, in smoky back rooms, or during slow walks through courtyards, they pass on lessons wrapped in stories. To Vincenzo, these men are both guides and case studies, examples of what to emulate, and at times, what mistakes to avoid. One uncle, seasoned and respected, shows him how words can be sharper than knives. He explains that when collecting payments, tone matters as much as threat. A smile can unsettle just as much as a glare, because the victim never quite knows which way things will go. Vincenzo listens intently, noting how fear is most effective when it is clean, not messy. Violence, he learns, is a tool of last resort. Reputation and efficiency are far more profitable. Another mentor, a cousin involved in smuggling, teaches him the importance of timing. Ships arrive, trucks depart, and each movement is a cog in a machine. Miss one moment, and the entire plan collapses. Vincenzo studies his cousin's maps of delivery routes, learning to see logistics not as chance, but as choreography. He is fascinated by the precision required, and he begins to apply the same thinking to small errands, testing how quickly tasks can be done, how routes can be optimized. There are mentors by example too. Vincenzo watches the flamboyant types, the ones who drive fast cars and throw cash at nightclubs. They are admired in the moment, but often end up targeted by police or rivals. To him, they are cautionary tales. He resolves never to be that visible. He would rather be underestimated than exposed. The lessons extend beyond business. Family gatherings themselves are training grounds. At weddings, Vincenzo observes who sits at which table, who greets whom first, who brings the largest envelope of cash. Each gesture signals status, alliance, or rivalry. His elders do not need to tell him this. He learns by watching their eyes, by noticing how their laughter grows louder when certain men arrive, and how it dims when others pass by. One moment crystallizes this education. At a neighborhood funeral, the clan gathers in full force. Respect is paid, condolences offered, but beneath the surface, strategies are unfolding. Vincenzo notices an uncle whispering quietly with men from another district, their heads bowed, hands gesturing subtly. Later, when he asks, the uncle tells him, "Even in grief, business moves. Remember that." Vincenzo files it away as another truth. Every gathering is an opportunity, every moment a negotiation. Many people still think that these lessons were accidental, fragments picked up in passing. But what do you think? Was it not deliberate grooming? A slow preparation for leadership? The elders saw in Vincenzo not just a nephew, but a vessel for continuity. His seriousness, his ability to listen, his refusal to waste, all marked him as the one to carry the family's name forward. There is humor in the mentorship too. Once, during a long night of counting smuggled cigarettes, an older cousin complains about the endless tallying. Vincenzo, without looking up, remarks that if they spent less time smoking the product themselves, they would finish faster. The room bursts into laughter, the older men slapping his back. The joke is light, but the respect it earns is real. He has shown he can balance calculation with wit, easing tension without losing focus. By his mid-20s, Vincenzo is no longer just a quiet observer. He is an apprentice to power, shaped by mentors who see in him both reliability and potential. He carries their lessons like tools in a kit, precision from one, prudence from another, restraint learned by contrast. And though he respects them, he also begins to imagine ways he might improve upon their methods. To him, mentorship is not about imitation, but about evolution. In 1980, the Earth itself convulses. The Irpinia earthquake, one of the deadliest in Italy's modern history, strikes the southern regions, killing thousands and leaving whole towns reduced to rubble. For Naples, though spared the worst devastation, the shock is still immense. Streets fill with panic, buildings sway, and families pour out into the open, clinging to one another. For a young Vincenzo Licciardi, the tremors are unforgettable, not just for their physical force, but for the opportunity they create in the shadows of ruin. In the aftermath, Italy floods the south with aid. Trucks arrive with food, blankets, and supplies. Government funds pour into reconstruction projects. The chaos of bureaucracy, however, ensures that much of it arrives late, mismanaged, or ripe for exploitation. The Camorra, already woven into the fabric of Naples, steps into the breach. To many families, it feels like the only efficient authority in sight. Aid shipments vanish into warehouses controlled by clans. Construction contracts mysteriously land in the hands of men already whispered about in bars. Vincenzo watches closely. He sees his uncle suddenly busier than ever, attending meetings not just with street toughs, but with contractors, foremen, and even local politicians. He realizes that crime is no longer just about intimidation. It is about infrastructure. The earthquake, for all its destruction, acts as a catalyst, pushing the Camorra deeper into legitimate industries. Cement, steel, transportation, all essential for rebuilding, become channels for both profit and influence. One evening, he accompanies an older cousin to a construction site. Dust clouds the air, scaffolding rattles in the breeze, and men in hard hats shout orders. At first glance, it looks like ordinary work. But Vincenzo notices that the cement deliveries are lighter than they should be, the bags already thinned. Corners are being cut, money siphoned. He says nothing, but the realization burns into his mind. Even tragedy is an opportunity for those willing to exploit it. The earthquake also shifts the balance of power in Naples. Smaller gangs, unable to compete with the sudden rush of money and resources, either dissolve or fall under the sway of larger clans. Vincenzo watches as the Licciardi family grows stronger, their reputation bolstered by their ability to organize chaos. Shopkeepers whisper their names with new respect. Politicians, once distant, now quietly nod when family members approach. The line between legality and illegality blurs further than ever. Many people still think that natural disasters simply expose corruption. But what do you think? Wasn't it also true that these events accelerated the transformation of groups like the Camorra into something bigger, more structured, more dangerous? For Vincenzo, the earthquake is not remembered only for collapsed buildings, but for the doors it opened. Amid all this, his role continues to expand. Trusted by mentors, respected by peers, he is sent to observe meetings where contractors haggle over inflated budgets. He learns how bribes are disguised as fees, how false invoices are passed without question, how men in suits walk hand in hand with men in leather jackets. For him, these encounters are like advanced courses in engineering, not of machines, but of systems designed to funnel wealth. There is irony, too. While entire neighborhoods mourn their dead, while rubble still blocks side streets, Vincenzo finds himself laughing quietly at the absurdity of a politician arguing about how many chairs to order for a temporary office. The contrast is stark. Human suffering on one side, bureaucratic pettiness on the other, and opportunists in between. His humor is not cruel, but detached, a recognition that Naples itself often feels like a tragicomedy. In the end, the earthquake reshapes more than buildings. It reshapes Vincenzo's vision of what power looks like. No longer is it about who can collect the most envelopes or intimidate the most shopkeepers. Real power lies in contracts, in cement trucks, in the ability to decide which neighborhoods rise again and which remain broken. The lesson is clear. The world will always shake, but those who control the rebuilding will always profit. The smell of cement becomes the scent of money in Naples after the earthquake. Reconstruction floods the city with contracts, and the Licciardi clan learns quickly that every brick, every truckload of gravel, every hour of labor can be turned into profit. Vincenzo, now in his mid-20s, stands at the edge of construction sites, not as a worker, but as a quiet auditor. He notes who arrives late, who brings substandard materials, who pockets a little extra from the budget. To him, these are not flaws, but features of a system that rewards control. Cement contracts are gold. The government, desperate to rebuild, doles out funds without the tight scrutiny you might expect. The Camorra steps in as the middleman, suggesting which companies should receive the work. Firms that comply prosper. Those that resist find trucks mysteriously vandalized or permits delayed. Vincenzo is fascinated by how this economy functions. For the first time, he sees that the clan doesn't need to hold a gun to dominate. It can simply hold a pen. One afternoon, he follows an uncle into a modest office where two contractors argue over a bid. The numbers fly, the voices rise. Then his uncle, calm and deliberate, clears his throat. The room falls silent. He announces that the work will be divided, each firm receiving its share. Neither man dares object. Vincenzo watches, realizing the brilliance. The clan has just created harmony by imposing itself as arbiter. No wasted bullets, no blood, just authority woven into business. The trick, he learns, is in dilution. Cement is often mixed thinner than regulations allow, stretching supplies and boosting profit. A wall may crack years later, but by then, the money has been laundered through multiple channels. Vincenzo sees the elegance in it, how crime can masquerade as construction, how illegality can wear the costume of civic duty. Many people still think the Camorra thrived only through fear. But what do you think? Was it not also through efficiency, stepping into spaces where the state faltered? Vincenzo himself begins to sketch new diagrams, not of alleys this time, but of flows between companies, contracts, and political offices. To him, it resembles circuitry, inputs of public funds, outputs of private gain, regulators serving as reluctant resistors, and the clan ensuring current flows smoothly. His friends may joke about making easy money, but he is already engineering a more durable system. There are moments of absurd humor amid the concrete dust. At one site, a foreman insists the walls are built to last a century. Just as he says it, a chunk of plaster crumbles off the corner. Vincenzo smirks, remarking that perhaps the foreman meant the wall would last a century in dog years. The workers laugh nervously, unsure whether to take it as a joke or a warning. It is Vincenzo's way of lightening tension while reminding everyone he is paying attention. The reconstruction boom also broadens horizons. Through these contracts, Vincenzo hears of companies in northern Italy willing to collaborate, of foreign suppliers eager for deals. For the first time, his imagination stretches beyond Naples. If cement can be controlled, why not steel? Why not shipping? Why not international trade? At home, his family benefits. Better food arrives on the table. New clothes replace threadbare ones, and there is talk of moving into a larger apartment. But Vincenzo keeps himself grounded. He refuses flashy cars, dismisses the idea of designer suits. To him, the greatest luxury is invisibility. The less people notice him, the safer and more effective he becomes. By the end of the decade, the earthquake's devastation has morphed into a foundation for empire. Entire fortunes are built on contracts signed in haste, and Vincenzo stands in the midst of it, learning lessons that will shape his rule. He understands now. Money is not made in the rubble, but in the rebuilding. And those who pour the cement decide how the future hardens. The Camorra of Naples in the 1980s no longer resembles the ragged neighborhood gangs of old. What once were boys with knives and cigarettes has become a structure with ledgers, accountants, and networks that feel closer to corporations than street crews. For Vincenzo Licciardi, this evolution is a revelation. He watches as his uncles and cousins stop thinking like enforcers and start thinking like businessmen. The language of power shifts from threats to percentages, from alleyway standoffs to balance sheets. It begins with diversification. Cigarette smuggling still pays, but new products enter the market. Electronics, designer clothes, even toys, all slip past customs and flood the streets of Naples. Each item carries not just profit, but proof that the Camorra can deliver what ordinary shops cannot. Vincenzo observes the logistics, which containers get flagged, which officials accept bribes, which trucks move quickest. To him, it looks like a supply chain, a system he can map, adjust, and optimize. He notices that violence, though still present, has been reframed. Instead of brawls in alleys, disputes are now resolved in quiet meetings over espresso. Leaders shake hands, share envelopes, and agree on terms. Guns remain under jackets, but their use is rare. Reputation does the heavy lifting. Vincenzo admires this. He sees that the smartest bosses are those who minimize chaos, who make money flow smoothly without constant disruption. He tucks that principle into his growing mental library. Stability equals profit. At the same time, he senses the dangers of expansion. Rival clans, emboldened by the new wealth, begin to push boundaries. Some invest in narcotics, others in foreign partnerships. Tensions simmer, and the risk of open conflict looms. Vincenzo listens as elders debate strategy. Some call for aggression, others for restraint. He leans toward the latter, though he is still too junior to voice it. To him, it seems clear. Wars drain resources, but systems make them multiply. One telling moment occurs at a family gathering when an older cousin boasts about a violent raid that forced a rival to back down. The room chuckles, nodding approval. But Vincenzo, quiet as always, simply asks, "And what did it cost us?" The question stills the laughter. It is a reminder that violence may win the day, but costs linger. He is beginning to sound less like a foot soldier and more like a strategist. Naples itself reflects this transformation. The skyline sprouts cranes, new buildings rise, and commerce hums louder than before. Yet beneath the surface, everyone knows who oils the gears. Markets teem with goods at suspiciously low prices. Bars host meetings where briefcases exchange hands. The Camorra is no longer in the shadows. It is in the bloodstream of the city. Many people still think it was only greed, but what do you think? Was it not also a response to demand? People wanted cheaper goods, quicker services, faster solutions. The clans delivered, even if by illicit means. Vincenzo begins to stand out. Elders praise his caution, his eye for detail, his refusal to rush. Friends trust his judgment, following his lead in small ventures. His reputation as the engineer starts to take shape, not because he builds structures of steel and stone, but because he builds frameworks of efficiency. He is the one who asks how processes can be streamlined, how risks can be minimized, how profits can be spread without waste. Humor, though rare for him, still surfaces. Once, during a discussion about bribing a customs officer, someone jokes that the officer eats more than the trucks he inspects. Vincenzo, without missing a beat, remarks, "At least the trucks deliver something." The room erupts in laughter, tension broken. But the point is clear. Every cog in the machine must justify its cost. By the mid-1980s, Vincenzo is no longer just a participant in Camorra life. He is a rising architect of it. He has learned that real power is not in the noise of gunfire, but in the quiet flow of money, contracts, and agreements that seem invisible until you trace their effects. The Camorra is evolving, and so is he. In that evolution, he finds his calling, not to rule through fear, but to engineer a system so efficient it outlives any single man. By the late 1980s, a nickname begins to circle quietly through Naples. L'ingénieur, the engineer. It isn't shouted in bars or sprayed across walls, but murmured in back rooms, passed along with a knowing nod. Vincenzo Licciardi has never studied architecture or mechanics, but his reputation grows because he builds something else entirely, systems of order in a world that thrives on chaos. The title comes partly from his demeanor. He is meticulous, calm, and prefers calculation over improvisation. Associates remark that he listens longer than he speaks, and when he finally does, his words often cut to the root of a problem. He does not brag, does not dress loudly, does not move with the swagger of street-level bosses. Instead, he dissects situations as if they were equations. Extortion, for example, is no longer just a matter of knocking on doors. For Vincenzo, it becomes a structure. He introduces a kind of bookkeeping to payments. Rather than random sums demanded at random times, he suggests regular intervals, standardized amounts based on the size of each business. A tailor pays less than a supermarket, a cafe less than a construction firm. The logic appeals to both sides. Shopkeepers resent the burden, but at least they know what to expect. Collectors feel safer, less likely to provoke panic that might attract police. Vincenzo has turned a racket into something resembling a tax system. One evening, during a discussion with his cousins, he sketches a chart on scrap paper. Rows for businesses, columns for months, marks to track who is paid and who is not. It is crude, but revolutionary for a clan still operating on memory and intimidation. His relatives laugh at first, joking that he wants to be an accountant. But as the months pass and the collections grow smoother, the laughter fades into respect. The engineer is not a nickname anymore. It is recognition of a mind shaping the clan's future. This new reputation brings advantages. Merchants whisper that dealing with the Licciardis is less chaotic than with rival clans. Even victims prefer predictability, and Vincenzo exploits this. Fear mixed with order is stronger than fear alone. Rivals notice too. Some mock him for overthinking. Others worry he is making their own crude methods look outdated. The title also fits his growing influence beyond extortion. He applies the same methodical eye to smuggling operations, suggesting routes that reduce risk, reorganizing crews so each man knows his role clearly. Where others rely on brute force, Vincenzo relies on structure. Many people still think that Camorra bosses were merely violent opportunists. But what do you think? Doesn't it seem that figures like Vincenzo showed another path? One where intellect replaced improvisation? There are moments of levity even in his precision. Once, when reviewing a delivery plan, a cousin accidentally writes the wrong address. If we follow this, Vincenzo quips dryly, we'll deliver the cigarettes to the bishop instead of the bar owner. The room bursts into laughter, tension eased, but the correction is made immediately. Humor, as always, is secondary to accuracy. For Vincenzo, the nickname is more than flattery. It is a signal that his role is shifting. He is no longer just a participant or apprentice. He is becoming the architect of a new style of leadership. Where previous generations relied on charisma or brutality, he relies on systems that function even when the leader is absent. In his mind, this is the only true way to build something that lasts. By the close of the decade, Naples has come to recognize that a new kind of Camorra boss is emerging, one who thinks less like a gangster and more like an engineer of influence. And in the quiet rhythm of his calculations, Vincenzo Licciardi finds his true identity. Extortion has always been the heartbeat of Camorra power, but under Vincenzo Licciardi, it begins to sound less like chaos and more like a metronome. He sees early on that unpredictable shakedowns create unnecessary risks. Shopkeepers panic, complain to police, or worse, turn to rival clans for protection. Vincenzo proposes something radical in its simplicity. Treat extortion like a structured system, a tax that everyone in the neighborhood understands. Instead of random visits, collectors now follow schedules. Payments are set not by whim, but by scale. Small cafes contribute modest sums, while larger businesses shoulder heavier burdens. This fee for safety is recorded carefully, with ledgers that rival any accountant's books. Merchants still resent paying, of course, but there is relief in predictability. They know the amount, the date, and the face who will come to collect. In a city where bureaucracy often fails and taxes vanish into state corruption, the Camorra becomes, perversely, the more reliable authority. Vincenzo oversees this with his characteristic calm. He insists that collectors be polite, almost professional. A nod, a handshake, a receipt of sorts in memory, if not on paper. Violence is reserved only for the stubborn few, and even then, it is swift and measured. By limiting bloodshed, he reduces police attention and strengthens the clan's reputation as organized rather than reckless. Many people still think extortion was purely brutish theft, but what do you think? Wasn't it also, in this case, a shadow form of governance? One that replaced the absent state with something darker yet strangely efficient? One shopkeeper later recalls how collectors under Vincenzo's watch even joked occasionally, softening the edge. "We're here to collect the municipal fee," one said with a grin, tapping the counter. The shopkeeper laughed nervously, but paid without argument. That small moment of levity captured the strange paradox. Fear laced with routine, threat wrapped in familiarity. Vincenzo's system spreads quickly. Other clans take notice, some adopting similar methods, others grumbling that he is turning crime into accounting. But results speak louder than pride. Collections rise steadily, complaints drop, and police raids yield fewer witnesses willing to testify. The engineer has proven his point. Order pays better than chaos. There is irony here, too. At a family dinner, a cousin teases him. "You've made us into tax collectors." Vincenzo smirks and replies, "The state should thank us. We're more efficient than they are." Laughter follows, but everyone at the table knows there is truth in his words. Naples may curse the Camorra, but it also relies on the strange stability it imposes. By the late 1980s, the system is so smooth that Vincenzo rarely needs to involve himself directly. His reputation alone ensures compliance. Merchants may loathe the payments, but they also whisper that if forced to choose, they'd rather deal with the Licciardis than with the unpredictable violence of rivals. It is, in its way, customer service, delivered at the barrel of a gun. For Vincenzo, the success of structured extortion is more than financial gain. It is proof of his theory. A clan is strongest when it runs like machinery, predictable, reliable, and self-sustaining. He has not only collected money, he has engineered trust, if such a word can apply to fear made systematic. And in that trust, he finds the blueprint for everything he will later build. Rival clans are never far away in Naples. By the end of the 1980s, as the Licciardi system of order gains strength, other families in the city begin to bristle. Some resent Vincenzo's innovations. Others fear the way his steady methods make their own chaotic operations look weak. The landscape becomes tense, each quarter of the city a chessboard of fragile truces. In the streets of Secondigliano, whispers of conflict hang in the air. Small disputes flare up, an insult outside a bar, a shipment intercepted on the road, a shopkeeper caught paying protection to two clans at once. These sparks threaten to ignite larger fires. Vincenzo observes all this with cool calculation. To him, rivals are not just enemies to be destroyed. They are variables in a system to be managed. He prefers negotiation over bloodshed because he knows that constant fighting only drains resources. Still, the possibility of war never fully disappears. One rival family in particular, rooted in Scampia, grows ambitious. They see Vincenzo's structured extortion as encroachment on their traditional turf. Their collectors begin doubling demands from merchants, testing loyalty. Violence erupts in scattered bursts. A beating here, a shop window shattered there. Vincenzo responds not with rage, but with meetings. He calls together intermediaries, seating men at long tables in smoky cafes, and reminds them that wars bring nothing but funerals. He argues for balance, for agreements that let everyone profit. His calm voice cuts through tension, though not all rivals are convinced. The police, sensing the growing instability, increase their presence. Raids become more frequent, patrols heavier. But to the clans, this only complicates the board further. Vincenzo adapts, adjusting schedules, rerouting shipments, even pausing collections in areas under heavy watch. His system flexes without breaking, proving once again that structure is more resilient than raw force. Many people still think the Camorra thrived on endless blood feuds. But what do you think? Doesn't Vincenzo's restraint suggest another truth? That sometimes survival means resisting the impulse to strike back. Yet restraint does not mean weakness. When rivals push too far, he responds decisively. In one memorable case, a stubborn rival collector continues to harass merchants already under Licciardi protection. Vincenzo allows it for a time, gathering reports, measuring the man's pattern. Then, one night, the collector vanishes. No spectacle, no bodies left in alleys, just absence. The message is clear. Order will be maintained. Rivals back off, not because of fear alone, but because they realize Vincenzo's hand is steady, deliberate, and final when necessary. There are moments of absurdity, even amid the tension. During one heated meeting with rival emissaries, an argument drags on endlessly over which family should control vending machines in a handful of schools. Vincenzo, exasperated, mutters, "If this is what brings Naples to war, coins for candy, then perhaps we deserve the chaos." The room bursts into laughter, tension broken long enough to strike a compromise. Humor, as always, becomes one of his subtle tools. The balance remains fragile, however. The 1990s loom with the promise of both expansion and escalation. Vincenzo knows the coming years will test whether his structured approach can withstand not only rivals, but also the ever-growing pressure from police and politicians. Still, he is confident. To him, rivals are not walls, but obstacles to be engineered around. And in the delicate dance of alliances and conflicts, he is determined to keep the machine running. Alliances in Naples are stitched together with the same fragile thread as rivalries, tight in the moment, but always one tug away from unraveling. For Vincenzo Licciardi, these years are a constant exercise in negotiation, the balancing act of keeping enemies at bay while ensuring allies do not grow too powerful. He moves carefully, knowing that a handshake can mean profit today, but betrayal tomorrow. At the center of this balancing act are the endless sit-downs, long wooden tables in backroom trattorias, cigarettes burning down to their filters, plates of pasta going cold, while men argue over percentages. Vincenzo rarely raises his voice in these meetings. Instead, he listens, allowing others to vent, watching how their hands twitch, how their eyes shift when money is mentioned. Then, when silence threatens to collapse the room, he speaks. Calm, measured, rational. He suggests compromises that feel fair even when they tilt in his favor. By the end of the night, men who entered ready for war often leave with agreements instead. Still, not every negotiation ends cleanly. Some bosses see his restraint as weakness, mistaking calculation for hesitation. They push harder, demanding bigger shares, threatening disruptions. Vincenzo does not respond with bluster. He waits, gathering information, ensuring that when he finally acts, it is decisive enough to silence doubts for years. Many people still think Camorra alliances lasted only on fear, but what do you think? Wasn't it also that figures like Vincenzo engineered stability, however temporary, by making cooperation more profitable than conflict? One example stands out. Two clans, both eager to control the same string of gambling halls, approach him for mediation. Tempers flare, insults fly. Vincenzo lets the storm rage before calmly dividing the territory. Alternating weeks of collection, split profits, and a small tax to the Licciardis for guaranteeing peace. The men grumble, but accept. The gambling halls reopen, money flows, and bloodshed is avoided. Later, one of his cousins jokes that Vincenzo should run for mayor, since he governs more effectively than City Hall. Vincenzo only smirks, replying that politicians work for applause, while he works for results. These alliances are not limited to Naples. Vincenzo begins to cultivate relationships with contacts outside the city. Calabrian and 'Ndrangheta members, Sicilian Cosa Nostra envoys, even hints of foreign traffickers. Each bond is cautious, transactional, but essential for expansion. He sees that Naples cannot remain insular if it wants to dominate. The engineer, as always, thinks in systems, and systems thrive when networks connect. Of course, alliances also require constant upkeep. Gifts must be exchanged, favors granted, loyalties tested. Weddings and baptisms serve as perfect stages, public celebrations masking private negotiations. Vincenzo makes his presence known without flaunting. He offers envelopes, attends ceremonies, and quietly ensures that the Licciardi clan is always seen as dependable. In a world where trust is rare, he makes reliability his brand. Humor surfaces even here. At one wedding, as rival bosses argue over seating arrangements, Vincenzo leans to a cousin and whispers, "If we survive this dinner without a stabbing, it will be the first miracle Naples has seen in years." The cousin stifles a laugh, and somehow the tension eases just enough for the evening to pass without incident. By the early 1990s, the network of alliances Vincenzo helps maintain begins to resemble a loose federation. The clans are not unified under one flag, but they function like connected gears, each turning the other. Fragile, yes, but functional. And though everyone knows the piece could fracture at any moment, Vincenzo's steady hand ensures the machine continues to hum. For him, this is not just survival. It is proof that in a world addicted to chaos, even temporary order can be engineered. The 1990s open with a storm of flashing sirens. Italian authorities, weary of decades of mafia power, launch fresh crackdowns across Naples. Police raids sweep through Secondigliano and Scampia at dawn, battering down doors, hauling men into vans, and parading them before cameras. Newspapers fill their pages with photos of handcuffed suspects, their faces blurred only slightly, the headlines promising a new era of law and order. For Vincenzo Licciardi, still in the prime of his ascent, this is less a shock than a calculation. How to keep the machine running when the state finally decides to press harder. The crackdowns are not random. Investigations target the biggest earners: drug operations, smuggling routes, and construction contracts fattened by earthquake aid. Vincenzo studies the raids with a detached eye. He notices how police focus on flashy bosses, men who drive Jaguars or flaunt Rolexes. He quietly congratulates himself for never indulging in those traps. He drives modest cars, wears understated jackets, and ensures his money flows through layers impossible to trace. His invisibility, once mocked, is now his greatest shield. Still, the pressure is real. Some of his friends vanish overnight, arrested in sweeps. Others turn nervous, whispering about collaborators. Courtrooms fill with pentiti, informants, spilling secrets for lighter sentences. Vincenzo sits through meetings where names are read aloud, each one a reminder that silence is the only true currency in Naples. He reinforces this to his men, insisting on discipline. Loose talk is forbidden, casual boasting punished with exclusion. The state's aggression ripples through daily life. Police checkpoints sprout on highways, helicopters hover over housing projects, and plainclothes officers prowl bars once considered safe. To the average Neapolitan, it feels like a siege. But for the clans, it is also an opportunity. With rivals disrupted by arrests, Vincenzo quietly expands influence. He steps into territories left leaderless, offering stability in exchange for loyalty. Many people still think crackdowns crippled the Camorra entirely. But what do you think? Wasn't it also true that men like Vincenzo adapted, bending under pressure only to rise stronger? He refines his systems further. Collections are staggered to avoid patterns. Meetings are moved constantly, sometimes to absurd places. A laundromat, a soccer pitch at night, even once inside a hospital corridor where the hum of machines drowned whispers. The adaptability impresses his allies, though some grumble at the constant adjustments. Vincenzo explains it simply. If they study us, we must change the formula faster than they can learn it. The phrase becomes a quiet mantra within his circle. There are moments of unintentional humor, too. During one police raid, officers storm a warehouse only to find it stacked, not with contraband, but with crates of tomatoes. The next morning, Vincenzo chuckles to a cousin. At least someone will eat well from their hard work. The joke spreads through the neighborhood, softening fear with laughter. Even in crisis, Naples clings to irony. The crackdown years also sharpen Vincenzo's belief in discretion. He doubles down on his philosophy of being the engineer, not the loud figure in photographs, but the quiet architect behind the curtain. While other bosses bask in fleeting fame, he remains a shadow, content to let his systems speak for him. By the mid-1990s, the state has jailed dozens, but the Secondigliano network still thrives. Vincenzo emerges not weakened, but strengthened, proving that while raids can seize men, they cannot dismantle structures designed to outlast individuals. For him, the lesson is clear. Chaos can be endured if the blueprint is strong enough. And in his hands, that blueprint only grows sharper. The towers of Scampia rise like monuments to ambition and despair. Built as part of modernist dreams for housing thousands, they quickly become something else. Fortresses of poverty, echo chambers of desperation, and soon, marketplaces for drugs that flow like rivers through their stairwells. By the 1990s, these concrete blocks are no longer just housing projects. They are warehouses of commerce, where heroin and cocaine are stacked in apartments and sold at windows as casually as bread. For Vincenzo Licciardi, the towers are not a tragedy to lament. They are infrastructure to be mastered. He studies the geography carefully. Each building is a hive, with staircases serving as arteries and courtyards as beating hearts. Lookouts are placed on rooftops. Children paid to whistle warnings at the sight of police. Apartments become laboratories. Kitchens transform into storage rooms. Balconies into counters. To outsiders, it looks like chaos. To Vincenzo, it is an opportunity to impose order. He imagines the towers as a circuit board, each hallway a pathway for money and narcotics, each inhabitant a cog in the machinery. The profits are staggering. A single day's sales from one tower rival what extortion racks up in a month. Addicts arrive from across Italy, cars lined outside like customers at a drive-thru. Dealers move with frightening efficiency, handing out doses, collecting money, vanishing behind steel doors before sirens even reach the street. Vincenzo sees in this not only fortune, but sustainability, if managed properly. He insists on discipline, shifts for dealers, fixed prices, standardized packaging. He transforms street dealing into something resembling a corporation. Of course, the dangers multiply as quickly as the profits. Overdoses stain stairwells, rival crews invade apartments, and the police intensify their raids. Helicopters circle above, television cameras capture the misery, and politicians call Scampia a national disgrace. Many people still think the drug boom was a chaotic free-for-all. But what do you think? Wasn't it also the testing ground for Vincenzo's vision, where he proved that even in the wildest disorder, Systems could bring control. He introduces a hierarchy. Street-level dealers report to shift managers, who report to regional coordinators, who in turn answer to the clan. Payments are logged, sometimes literally in notebooks disguised as schoolwork, and discrepancies are punished swiftly. This structure reduces theft, increases loyalty, and ensures that profits rise steadily. Addicts may still stumble through the stairwells, but behind the scenes, Vincenzo runs operations like an engineer tightening bolts on a machine. There are surreal moments amid the grimness. Once, during a quiet inspection of a tower operation, Vincenzo overhears a dealer telling a customer, "We're closed for lunch. Come back in an hour." The absurdity almost makes him laugh. A drug empire taking lunch breaks like a cafe. Another reminder that even the underworld craves routine. Neighbors, meanwhile, live in contradiction. Some curse the clans for turning their homes into bazaars of misery. Others quietly appreciate the money that trickles down. The groceries bought, the bills paid by sons working security. For many, silence is survival. They keep shutters closed, pretend not to notice, and accept that in Scampia, the Camorra is both poison and provider. By the late 1990s, the towers are infamous across Europe. Journalists call them fortresses of drugs, filmmakers use them as backdrops, and sociologists dissect their design. But behind the headlines stands Vincenzo Licciardi, quietly orchestrating the system. He does not appear in photos. He does not grant interviews. But his hand is everywhere. In the order, in the profits, in the enduring myth that Scampia is less a housing project and more an empire. For him, the towers prove his belief beyond doubt. Chaos can be managed, disorder engineered into function. And from those bleak slabs of concrete, he builds not just wealth, but the foundations of what will become the Secondigliano alliance. By the end of the 1990s, a new phrase begins to circulate through Naples: l'Alleanza di Secondigliano, the Secondigliano alliance. It is not a formal government, not a registered company, but everyone knows what it means. Several powerful families, once rivals, now function under a single umbrella. And at the center of this architecture, silent but undeniable, stands Vincenzo Licciardi. He is not the loudest boss, not the most feared killer, but he is the engineer who draws the blueprint and ensures the gears mesh. The alliance emerges from necessity. Wars between clans have drained money and filled cemeteries. Police pressure grows heavier with each gunshot. Vincenzo sees what others refuse to admit. Survival depends on unity. He persuades allies not with grand speeches, but with spreadsheets of logic. Why divide profits with bullets when they can be multiplied with cooperation? Why risk chaos when order can make everyone rich? His reasoning is hard to ignore. Slowly, the pieces fall into place. The alliance divides territories with mathematical precision. Each family controls its neighborhood, its businesses, its extortion rackets. Disputes are settled not in alleys, but in meetings, where percentages are argued over like lawyers negotiating contracts. Vincenzo designs the framework so that profits flow upward, disputes flow sideways, and violence, ideally, flows nowhere. To him, it is less a criminal gang and more a consortium, a boardroom that happens to operate in shadow. Many people still think of mafia organizations as loose, chaotic mobs, but what do you think? Doesn't the Secondigliano alliance resemble a corporation, with departments, managers, and oversight? Vincenzo ensures that even the drug trade in Scampia follows this pattern. Quotas, shifts, and accountability. If the 1980s taught him the value of structure, the 1990s prove its triumph. The Alliance's reach expands quickly. With combined resources, it controls smuggling routes from the port, extortion networks across multiple districts, and the ever-growing drug empire. Rivals outside Naples take notice, and some even seek partnerships. The 'Ndrangheta in Calabria, the Sicilians of Cosa Nostra, Spanish traffickers, all understand that Naples is no longer fractured. It speaks with one voice, and that voice is engineered by Licciardi logic. Of course, unity is never perfect. Arguments flare over profits. Jealousies simmer between families. Yet Vincenzo's system contains mechanisms for resolution. Regular meetings, rotating mediators, even what some call shadow courts, where disputes are settled by vote. It is a strange blend of democracy and dictatorship, but it works. Bloodshed decreases, profits rise, and the Alliance begins to feel inevitable, as if it had always been there. There is even humor in the bureaucracy of it all. At one meeting, a clan leader complains about the paperwork required to track payments. Vincenzo, deadpan, replies, "Even crime needs accountants." The room laughs, but no one misses the point. Efficiency requires record keeping, even if the records are coded and hidden in school notebooks. For Naples, the effects are visible. Streets grow quieter, at least on the surface. Merchants pay predictably, dealers operate systematically, and violence, while never gone, flares less often. Residents whisper that the Alliance is both curse and stability. They may despise the Camorra, but some secretly admit life is less chaotic under Vincenzo's system. By the dawn of the 2000s, the Secondigliano Alliance is more than a criminal syndicate. It is an institution. And Vincenzo Licciardi, though still careful to remain in the background, has solidified his role as the engineer of its design. For him, it is the fulfillment of years of calculation, from boyhood maps of alleys to blueprints of entire empires. The Alliance is his masterpiece, and Naples moves to its rhythm. Power consolidation is never as dramatic as films make it. There are no thrones, no crowns, just quiet adjustments until one man's influence becomes the axis around which others turn. For Vincenzo Licciardi in the early 2000s, consolidation means refining the machinery of the Secondigliano Alliance until it runs so smoothly that no single cog can derail it. His brilliance lies not in grand gestures, but in the invisible threads he pulls to hold the entire structure together. He establishes rules, not suggestions. Every district must contribute a fixed share of profits to a central fund. Extortion, drug sales, smuggling, all are taxed by the Alliance, and those contributions ensure that no family feels cheated. Collections are standardized, disputes scheduled for resolution in designated meetings, punishments agreed upon in advance. It resembles less a criminal syndicate and more a federal government, complete with taxation, arbitration, and enforcement. Vincenzo smiles at the irony. The state may fail, but in the shadows, he has engineered one of his own. For subordinates, this system brings a strange relief. They know what is expected when payments are due, and what happens if they fall short. Fear still hangs in the air, but it is no longer arbitrary. For merchants, this predictability is perverse comfort. At least the Licciardis are organized, one cafe owner mutters, sliding an envelope across the counter. Many people still think the Camorra thrived only on chaos, but what do you think? Wasn't its endurance also rooted in the order Vincenzo imposed? To enforce this consolidation, Vincenzo appoints trusted managers to oversee sectors of the city. These men are not flamboyant killers, but disciplined coordinators. They monitor flows of money, ensure dealers stay within boundaries, and report discrepancies. It is less like a feudal kingdom and more like a corporate chain of command. Each layer insulates Vincenzo, keeping him distant from daily operations while ensuring he remains the unquestioned architect. Yet consolidation is not only about structure, it is also about culture. Vincenzo emphasizes discretion as a virtue. No flashy cars, no unnecessary violence, no reckless displays that draw headlines. He reminds his men that invisibility is strength, that true power never needs to announce itself. His own life reflects this. Modest suits, quiet meals, unremarkable apartments. He cultivates an image so ordinary that neighbors might describe him as simply serious, polite, perhaps even dull. Behind that mask lies the mastermind of an empire. There are still tensions, of course. Younger men grow restless, craving the adrenaline of old street wars. Rivals outside the alliance test boundaries. But Vincenzo knows how to channel ambition. He allows controlled skirmishes, small outlets for aggression, while keeping the larger system intact. Like an engineer releasing pressure from a valve, he ensures the machine never explodes. Humor surfaces even in these rigid routines. Once, during a meeting about dividing smuggling profits, an impatient lieutenant slams his fist on the table and grumbles, "We argue like accountants." Vincenzo, without missing a beat, replies, "Better accountants than undertakers." The room chuckles, but the message is clear. Profit is preferable to funerals. By the mid-2000s, the Secondigliano alliance is no longer fragile. It is consolidated, codified, and frighteningly efficient. Naples hums to its rhythm, whether citizens admit it or not. And in the quiet center of it all, Vincenzo Licciardi maintains his greatest achievement, an empire of shadows that functions with the precision of a machine. Leadership in Naples has often been measured by swagger, by who drives the flashiest car, who throws the biggest party, who walks into a cafe with the loudest entourage. But Vincenzo Licciardi breaks that mold completely. His style is low-key, almost invisible, and yet it is precisely this quietness that makes him formidable. While others chase fame, he cultivates anonymity. While rivals boast, he observes. He becomes the kind of leader whose absence at a meeting feels louder than another man's shouting. Neighbors describe him as reserved, even dull. He wears plain jackets, eats simple meals, walks without fanfare. He rarely travels in convoys. Often he is seen alone, head slightly bowed, as though he has nothing to prove. And yet, behind this facade, he steers one of the most complex criminal alliances in Europe. To Vincenzo, low-key leadership is not humility. It is armor. The less attention he draws, the longer his system survives. Within the alliance, his influence is unmistakable. Associates joke that he speaks less than anyone in the room, but when he does, decisions follow. He does not need to shout, because silence itself is his power. Men compete for his approval, and a single nod from him can feel like a contract signed in ink. This deliberate restraint makes him almost mythical, difficult to pin down, difficult to attack. He prefers delegation. Managers oversee drug networks, extortion rings, and smuggling routes. Each reports up the chain, each carefully monitored, but none given so much power that they could threaten the system. Vincenzo watches for signs of ego, trimming it back whenever it sprouts. For him, leadership is not about dazzling followers, but about ensuring the machine runs even if any single piece is removed. Many people still think mafia bosses led through charisma alone. But what do you think? Doesn't Vincenzo's method prove that control can be achieved through structure rather than spectacle? Even in tense moments, he avoids theatrics. Once, during a heated argument between lieutenants, voices rose, fists slammed tables. Vincenzo sat in silence, letting the chaos burn itself out. Then, when the room finally turned to him, he simply said, "If you two are finished proving who can shout louder, we can return to earning money." The words cut sharper than any threat, and the dispute ended. Humor, subtle but biting, becomes one of his quiet tools. His low-key approach also shields him from law enforcement. While rivals pose for photographs in nightclubs, Vincenzo leaves little evidence. He avoids ostentation, keeps his finances layered through intermediaries, and refuses to appear in places that draw cameras. When police compile charts of suspected bosses, his face is often missing. He prefers it that way. Let others chase headlines. He will settle for longevity. Among his closest allies, this style earns respect. They recognize that beneath the calm exterior lies relentless calculation. He is not easily provoked, not easily swayed, and certainly not easily betrayed. His aura of restraint makes even his smallest gesture significant. A raised eyebrow can silence a room. A half-smile can seal a deal. By the mid-2000s, Vincenzo Licciardi embodies a paradox. The invisible boss whose presence is everywhere. He leads not by towering above his men, but by disappearing into the system he designed. And in that disappearance lies his greatest strength, the ability to shape an empire without ever needing to stand in its spotlight. By the mid-2000s, Vincenzo Licciardi's reach stretches far beyond Naples. The city is still his base, but the network he engineers extends across borders, tracing smuggling routes like veins across Europe. The drug trade, once confined to courtyards and tower blocks, now links Secondigliano to Spain's Costa del Sol, to ports in the Balkans, and even to suppliers in South America. Vincenzo does not travel often, but his influence rides with every shipment, every crate that slips past customs under the Alliance's seal. Spain becomes a crucial hub. The port of Valencia, with its endless flow of containers, offers anonymity that Neapolitan docks can no longer guarantee. Associates settle there, posing as legitimate businessmen, importing fruit or textiles while cocaine hides deep inside shipments. Vincenzo orchestrates these deals from a distance, using intermediaries he trusts absolutely. His instructions are concise, his standards unyielding. Timing, weight, price, margin. To him, geography is irrelevant. The same system that disciplines a Neapolitan cafe owner can also discipline a Spanish trafficker. The Balkans offer another corridor. After the wars of the 1990s, smuggling networks flourish in the rubble of collapsed states. Weapons, fuel, narcotics, everything moves along those cracked roads and porous borders. Vincenzo ensures the Alliance has a presence, linking Naples to Montenegro and Albania. Ferries crossing the Adriatic carry not just tourists, but cargoes under his invisible command. Many people still think the Camorra operated only locally, but what do you think? Doesn't this expansion prove it was a European player, not just a Neapolitan phenomenon? Coordination is his genius. While other bosses flounder in international ventures, losing money to mistranslation and mistrust, Vincenzo insists on rules. Contracts are verbal but clear, quotas defined, penalties understood. He creates a chain of accountability that stretches across languages and currencies. His associates joke that he could run the European Union if he wanted, though they admit his version would be far more efficient. There are moments of levity, even in this global expansion. Once, a Spanish partner proudly serves paella during a meeting, only for Vincenzo to remark dryly, "If the rice is as diluted as your last shipment, we may need a refund." The room bursts into uneasy laughter. But the point is made. He tolerates no shortcuts. Humor is again his scalpel, precise, cutting, unforgettable. The profits swell. Cocaine moves by the ton, laundered through construction firms, restaurants, and even offshore accounts. Extortion and local rackets seem small compared to these streams, but Vincenzo never abandons them. He understands that international empires require local foundations. Naples remains the heart, beating steadily, pumping blood to far-flung limbs. Law enforcement begins to notice. Europol files mention the alliance, linking it to seizures in France, Spain, and Germany. But Vincenzo remains a ghost, rarely photographed, never flamboyant, his name whispered, but seldom proven. Investigators complain that while they can seize drugs, they cannot trace the blueprint. And that is exactly how he intends it. By now, Vincenzo Licciardi is not just the engineer of a Neapolitan system. He is the architect of a European web. From scaffolds of cement contracts to corridors of cocaine, he has transformed local cunning into continental strategy. And still, he does it quietly, with the same calm precision that has defined him from the beginning. Even the strongest structures are tested by loss. For Vincenzo Licciardi, the 2000s bring personal tragedies that weigh heavier than police raids or rival threats. Family, the same web that gave him strength, begins to fray. Cousins fall to bullets in feuds, uncles are hauled away in handcuffs, and close friends turn up dead in alleys that once felt safe. Each loss chips at him, not visibly. He remains calm, composed, but internally, the cost accumulates. One cousin, long considered his right hand, is ambushed on a rainy night. The news reaches Vincenzo during a quiet meal. He listens, sets down his fork, and simply nods. No outburst, no dramatic vow of revenge. Later, though, he adjusts the system. He rotates assignments more frequently, tightens security protocols, and reduces exposure for his most trusted men. Grief becomes fuel for efficiency. Emotion is contained, converted into engineering. His family at home feels the strain too. Parents age, siblings worry, wives and mothers bear the brunt of absence and uncertainty. Children grow up with fathers always away on business, a euphemism that fools no one. Vincenzo tries to shield them with gifts, with money slipped discreetly to cover tuition or medical bills. But even generosity cannot disguise the truth. His empire is built on shadows, and shadows consume those nearest to them. Naples itself mirrors this duality. Streets ring with laughter during festivals. Fireworks crackle against the night sky, but every celebration carries undertones of mourning. Funerals become as frequent as weddings, and Vincenzo attends both with the same measured expression. At funerals, his presence signals respect, his silence heavier than words. At weddings, his envelopes ensure loyalty, even as he avoids dancing or drawing notice. Many people still think mafia bosses thrived only on cruelty. But what do you think? Wasn't Vincenzo also bound by loss, forced to engineer systems that minimized risk because he understood too well how fragile life could be? He is not sentimental, but he is pragmatic. And pragmatism itself is born from grief. There are moments of dark humor amid the sorrow. Once, after attending 3 funerals in a single month, He mutters to a cousin, "At this rate, the florists of Naples owe us protection money." The remark earns a grim laugh, a reminder that even tragedy cannot completely suppress the Neapolitan instinct for irony. Tragedy also strengthens his belief in invisibility. He sees that flamboyant bosses die young, that public figures attract bullets as much as applause. His low-key leadership, already his signature, becomes non-negotiable. No more appearances at crowded clubs, no unnecessary risks. He keeps to modest apartments, avoids cameras, and rarely leaves Naples without reason. Loss has taught him that survival is not about being the strongest. It is about being the least exposed. By the late 2000s, Vincenzo is a man both hardened and hollowed by tragedy. He carries the weight of absent cousins, imprisoned uncles, grieving families. Yet he channels it not into vengeance, but into precision. The system must endure, he tells himself. Their deaths cannot be in vain if the machine they helped build continues to hum. And so he works, quietly, methodically, making sure that the alliance stands even as his own circle shrinks. Betrayal, in Naples, is never abstract. It walks the streets in familiar shoes, sits at dinner tables, smiles at baptisms. For Vincenzo Licciardi, who has built his empire on trust and silence, betrayal cuts deeper than bullets. In the 2000s, whispers of defectors begin to spread. Men who once collected envelopes, managed shipments, or stood guard outside meetings now sit in courtrooms, speaking into microphones, trading secrets for protection. The first time he hears of a long-time associate turning pentito, an informer, Vincenzo simply exhales, closes his eyes, and says nothing. Outwardly calm, but inside, he feels the tremor ripple through his system. He knows a machine is only as strong as its weakest valve, and betrayal is the crack that can flood everything. From that moment, he grows even more meticulous. Meetings are smaller, circles tighter, communication stripped to essentials. Where once trust was implicit, now it must be earned again and again. Some betrayals sting more than others. A childhood friend, once part of his inner crew, begins to waver under pressure from police. The man's sudden change of fortune, arrested one week, released the next, raises alarms. Vincenzo does not act rashly, but he notes every inconsistency, every excuse. Eventually, the truth surfaces. The friend has been speaking. Vincenzo does not rage. He simply arranges for the man to vanish, quietly, without spectacle. It is the only lesson betrayal understands, yet even decisive measures cannot stop the tide. As the Italian state strengthens witness protection, more men find incentive to talk. Courtrooms fill with stories, some true, some embellished, all damaging. Vincenzo reads transcripts, noting errors, contradictions, outright lies. Many people still think betrayal destroyed the Camorra's strength completely. But what do you think? Wasn't it also a stress test, forcing leaders like Vincenzo to adapt, to design systems that could withstand even treachery? He begins to engineer redundancy. No single man holds too much information. No operation relies on one link alone. If someone talks, the system adjusts. Drugs continue to move. Money continues to flow. Extortion schedules remain steady. Like an engineer designing fail-safes in a bridge, he builds his empire to bend without breaking. Amid this grim tightening, there are flashes of irony. During one meeting, after hearing that yet another minor lieutenant has defected, Vincenzo mutters, "If everyone in Naples keeps talking, soon the police will need subtitles to keep up." The remark sparks restrained laughter, a rare moment of levity in an otherwise tense room. Still, each betrayal leaves a scar. Trust, once his greatest currency, now feels like glass, valuable, but fragile. Vincenzo grows even more private, retreating from unnecessary contact, relying on only a handful of confidants. His low-key style, already legendary, becomes survival itself. By the end of the decade, the Secondigliano alliance is still intact, but the atmosphere has shifted. Betrayals have thinned its ranks, forced constant adaptation, and reminded Vincenzo that even the best engineered machine requires constant maintenance. And though he never says it aloud, he knows this truth. Betrayal is not an exception in Naples, it is an inevitability. His task is to ensure the system endures despite it. By the early 2000s, the Italian state escalates its campaign against the Camorra. Newspapers splash headlines about coordinated maxi operazioni, and dawn raids become a ritual in Naples. For Vincenzo Licciardi, these are not distant reports. They are lived reality. The alliance he has engineered is too visible now, too effective to remain untouched. Arrest warrants target not just soldiers but mid-level managers, accountants, and anyone suspected of greasing the gears of his empire. The net begins to tighten, and Vincenzo knows his turn will come. He adjusts, as always, shifting routines, changing meeting places, traveling at odd hours. Safe houses are scattered across Naples, apartments rented under false names, countryside villas stocked with supplies. He becomes a ghost within his own city, glimpsed in passing, then gone. For months at a time, he lives underground, never far but always out of reach. Associates deliver food, messages, and envelopes of cash. He reads newspapers daily, scanning not just the headlines but the subtext, weighing which politician has promised which crackdown. The pressure grows relentless. Helicopters hover over Scampia, police dogs sniff through stairwells, and cameras capture every arrest. Vincenzo takes precautions, yet he knows invisibility cannot last forever. He instructs his men to continue operations without him, reinforcing his philosophy. No empire should rely on a single man. The machine must turn even if the engineer steps away, he says. To them, it sounds like reassurance. To him, it is preparation. When the inevitable moment arrives in 2001, it is almost anticlimactic. Police corner him after months of surveillance, catching him in a modest apartment where he has been hiding. There are no shootouts, no cinematic escapes. He is calm, collected, even polite as the officers lead him out. Cameras flash, journalists shout, but Vincenzo says nothing. Silence, his lifelong ally, shields him one last time. In the courtroom, prosecutors paint him as a mastermind, the quiet architect of the Secondigliano alliance. Witnesses describe the system he built, the rules he imposed, the profits he controlled. Judges listen, jurors shift, and the press devours every detail. Vincenzo sits unmoved. He knows that every word is both truth and myth, twisted through the lens of betrayal and fear. Many people still think such trials dismantled the Camorra completely, but what do you think? Wasn't it also true that the structures he designed lived on, even as he sat behind bars? From prison, he hears reports that his methods endure. The alliance continues, territories remain divided, and profits still flow. His managers follow the systems he drilled into them: schedules, percentages, discipline. Even without its engineer, the machine runs. For Vincenzo, this is vindication. His design was never about himself. It was about permanence. There is one final irony in his arrest. As police lead him into custody, a journalist shouts, "Are you the boss of Naples?" Vincenzo, stone-faced, does not reply. Later, an officer jokes that his silence was the most eloquent answer possible. In that silence lies his legacy. A leader who spoke little, laughed rarely, and built one of the most enduring systems the Camorra had ever seen. And now, as our story drifts to its close, let us soften the tempo. The noise of sirens, the whispers of betrayal, the pulse of backroom deals, they fade into the distance, leaving only the hum of a city that has always carried both beauty and burden. Naples sleeps fitfully, its narrow streets still glowing under scattered lamps, laundry swaying gently in the night breeze. The machine that Vincenzo Licciardi once engineered continues to turn, but in this moment, all feels still. Imagine walking those alleys now, long after the last shop shutters have fallen. The smell of bread lingers from bakeries. The sea air drifts through broken courtyards, and the voices of the day have quieted into a hush. The shadows no longer menace. They simply stretch across the cobblestones like blankets. Life continues, as it always does, with or without the men who once claimed to control it. Close your eyes and let the weight of this story dissolve. The calculations, the betrayals, the quiet power, all of it belongs to history now. What remains for you is only the rhythm of breath, steady and calm, and the comfort of knowing that even in a city of storms, there are still nights of peace. So let yourself drift gently, as though you are being carried by the slow tide of the Mediterranean. The water is calm, the air soft, and the noise of the world recedes. In its place, there is only stillness, only rest. Sleep well, my friend. The story has ended, the lights are dim, and the engineer of Naples has vanished into silence.